Zoop, 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 zoop. Zoop, 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 zoop. Zoop, 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 zoop. Zoop, 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 zoop. Zoop, zoop, zoop. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Trying to get to the stupid channel so that I can actually do the show. It's not the right title. God damn it. You are track. Yeah. There we go. So actually, I really got to remember to change the title before I start the stream so that the email that gets sent out actually has the right title. Yeah. So, okay, what is going to happen actually before I do the track reviews, I actually want to make a video. Nah, I guess I could do that later. I was gonna make the R Silence playthrough video today, and I forgot. I wanted to have that up while the stream was happening, but that's weird. I guess I can just do it when the stream's done, so whatever. Should not be a problem. So in that case, let's go find review template. All right. There's this, and then I want the limiter, right? Yeah. Limiter. The limitar. It's like a scimitar, only the limitar. It's great. I'm gonna close Skype because I have no reason to have that open. And I'm actually gonna play something so that I can know where 0 dB is, because I know that the limiter is actually kind of low. Is there anything useful? Well, I actually just have a whole bunch of older review tracks in here. That's funny. This'll work. Or not. That's not what that is. Cool. I gotta clean up my shit. This'll do it. Hey, there we go. Now I have a much more accurate representation of dynamics for when I listen to people's tracks. Okay. Okay. Wow, 80 people already. Damn. People were waiting for this one. Shit. I guess that they do want to have the tracks. Yeah, the trash feed. All right, so let's go check out the email. So if you're unfamiliar with how this works, you send me now a track that you're working on. Come on, Gmail. What the fuck? Come on. I know it's the default. I don't want that one. Let's do it. Okay, well, and what's supposed to happen is I have an email account listed. Holy crap. You go scroll down, there's information about what's going on, and I have an email at SeamlessRlive@gmail.com, and send me the track that you want me to review. There's going to be a lot, so I'm just gonna pick stuff. I had a thing where, like, if you were a sub, I would give you preferential treatment or whatever, but like that whole thing kind of was weird. I gotta come up with something different for subs. I come up with something different for hair in my face, and I'm not 100% sure what I'm gonna do with that yet, because I'm not 100% on how to act with that. But I do have some ideas. Like, one of the things I was thinking about doing is for subs is like putting a little sub drive and being like, if I get 50 subs in a week, then I will make like a big room track using only massive or something weird like that. So yeah. Is my voice panned to the left a little bit? Yeah, kinda. The outputs out of my interface or into the mixer or with the cables or something a little bit uneven. I don't know what yet. I haven't quite figured that out. It's always been a problem. I don't know if you can actually detect that it's panned to the left a little bit, but yeah. Like, please actually read like the emails, the information. And someone just says, I don't care about the UP isn't starting until late so much. You're going to make it like 2 hours earlier. No, I can't. I can only do what I do when I do it. That's why I do it when I do it. I do other shit during the day, y'all. Alright, so, wow. A fucking huge amount of tracks just showed up right off the bat. Just for giggles, I'm going to do the first one that actually got here at 7 p.m., which is when the stream starts in my time. This is by Aaron McDonald, or RiceX, Ode to Sleep. I tried to make a liquid D&B track. How do you think I did? Let's find out. Okay, so I like that a lot. I guess that was a pre-master because it was pretty quiet, or at least, well, I mean, it was at 0 dB, but the dynamics there's a lot of that, well, a lot more dynamics than I'm used to seeing in these and stuff like that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If that's what you're after, then by all means, go for it. Um, like it felt good. Like the mix, there didn't seem to be like too much heavy influence on particular frequencies. There was a separate sub, so nice of you to do that. The bass was cool. I liked the filler bass. The only problem was that it got real repetitive and like way more than the genre already is. Like it there didn't seem to be much happening, from one part to the next part. I like a groove as much as the next guy, so you do have kind of like the repetitive elements, but like nothing at any point was added to anything. There was the piano, there was the filler bass, there was that voice, and there was the drums, and that's all that happened to the entire track. Now, like different rhythms didn't happen, like different kinds of modulations didn't happen, and that's really the only weakness of this track. So like if they needed something to work on, that would be the thing to work on, is to kind of expand sort of the stuff that you do in things, that kind of thing. Obviously, I prefer to have a little bit more busyness in a track at all, but again, that's not really the genre that I do. So cool, good job. Next. Strafe X Mario Athena. I feel like I've already played a track by you called Athena. And I don't remember it being a collaboration. Or whatever, I'm playing it anyway. Okay, so this track kind of struck me as a little schizophrenic, and it's probably not the way that you expect. Normally when I hear tracks like these, I think that like, okay, it's about it's like you hear the melodic parts of a track and then you think that like the drop comes on and the drop's like super unrelated to the melodic part and people are like, oh, whatever. The thing is though, is that you can't do that. You can do that and you can make it work, but like if you go too hard on the melodic part, which I feel like you did in this track, like because the melodic bits were like so melodic and so like engrossed and in depth and whatever, that when it went down to Terror Squad, that it felt like a super jip. It was just kind of like, It didn't quite work out well. But the thing is, though, is that I actually did like the drops. I liked the bass drops. And I actually think that this track, if you wanted to make it work like something a bit more coherent with itself, that you should make that the main bit. And weirdly, the way to make that work is to kind of reduce the melodic component of it, just in that kind of style. Like listen to the sort especially the second half, the drum step bit. Struck me, it kind of sounded like something like, at least rhythm wise, at least sound wise. The mix wasn't really there, but the sounds and the rhythm struck me as something that Skrillex would do. And if you listen to the actual tracks where Skrillex does that, you might notice that while there are melodic elements, they are not nearly as dense, large, or big. And it's not because he can't do that, it's because it doesn't really mix well with the relative sparseness of that kind of drop. At least in my opinion. Other than that, the kind of the reggae-ish piano that had way too much width on it. Like it felt like it wasn't even in there, really. It was kind of outside, and it felt kind of weird just to my ears. In the first drop, some of the basses like didn't feel like they belonged to each other, and that was mostly an EQ problem. Like some of them were way too high frequency, some of them were not high enough frequency, some of them they're just very imbalanced from one to the other. And it's not that you can't have two different, like very different basses being across each other. That's kind of like why that works, that kind of contrast. But they need to feel like they still like belong in the same song and that kind of thing. Other than that, like there were basic mixing issues. Like you had a separate subs, that was fine. Like most of the basic stuff was fine. It's just that like the compression, especially in the melodic parts, was a little too much. It's tiny bits, so tiny, and like the crispness was mostly gone from that. So yeah, like other than that, pretty cool. Like I like some of the sounds. It was neat. The arrangement, like the rhythm and sort of the arrangement of how the sounds worked, could have been a little bit reined in a bit. But other than that, it's mostly just the schizophrenic nature of it. And I know you said that it was a collaboration, but even in collaborations, can keep with two different styles can merge in a way that makes it feel like togetherness. Unless you're trying to be like versus, where like, oh, we make something so different, and this part's so different because that's something we're doing, I guess. I'm having way more interaction on this stream than I've had before. Zeden Legacy. It's apparently drum step. That was the whip. So, that almost had more of that schizophrenic nature problem that the other track did. Although, I will say this. Some of the sound design in that was, like, super cool. Like, some of the basses in there were, like, actually really interesting. Just the way that they were handled left a bit much to be desired, especially in contrast to the melodic elements that played right next to them. It had the same problem where they sort of like didn't feel like they belonged mostly in the same track. Because even if they are, like, even if you're playing like nice, pretty chords with arps and like melodies and whatever versus really dark, interesting basses, they can have the same EQ profile so that it sounds like they belong to each other. That's what I'm talking about when I mention that kind of thing. It's like I used to have this problem when I was doing metal songs, and I have clean guitar and distorted guitar. Because the impulse when I make a clean guitar is that I want it to be like crisp and like high frequency and sharp and like really dense like that sounding. The problem with that though is that those frequencies don't exist with the distorted version of the guitar. So that when the distorted version happens after having played those, it sounds way duller as a result because of that. So then you kind of like, get off on some of the highs, make it curve it so that it sounds kind of like it has the same kind of profile. And now it sounds a little bit less like the crispy, perfect, ultra clean guitar. But when the distorted comes in, it sounds like it belongs. So that's the point of that. And same thing like that there. The snare, I feel like the snare had no high frequencies at all. It was like only a mid two. Either that or there was just completely hidden by the rest of the high frequency content in the song. The sub was like the loudest thing in the universe. Probably doesn't need to be that loud. But, like, again, the basses were super cool. Like, I straight up just haven't heard stuff like that. At least not quite like that. It sounded like some things, but somewhat different. So, you got some chops there with your sound design, so that's cool. Next. Glitch Hop Whip by Steve Yuan. I don't know how to say that name. His name is Steve. Dynamic range. So there's a lot that I could talk about this particular track, but the first thing I'm going to talk about is your kick. Normally, I would say that you just need to have a better kick sample, but I'm actually going to describe to you what I mean by actually a better kick sample. You might not even need to get a better one, just maybe just EQ this one a bit differently. The problem with the kick that exists in this track is that there are just no mid frequencies. There's the low humph and then the high hi-hat that's attached to the kick. That's all there is. And it makes it sound super thin. So like bring up like the 500 hertz range and just kind of move a node around. Just try to feel how it feels when it has a little bit more of that in there. because it doesn't quite feel as though it's really punching anything. If you're doing ducking in any particular form, either sidechaining or manually, whatever, do it a lot harder in a track like this. That helps too. What the hell else? So this has the similar problem with the things not sounding quite like they belong to each other, mixing wise, EQing each sound that kind of remain in the track, but that's fine. It's a whip. You can work on that. A lot of this, like things weirdly have way too much higher frequency, like the hats and the drums, but then like the actual instruments don't. Like the basses and the synths and stuff do not sound like they have enough high enough frequencies in there, and that kind of is related to like making things sound like they belong. So this is sort of like it needs to fit all in there. It's a big. I was like, it's mixing 101, just mix it better. But this is like, like right. I can kind of see how, like, right there, you might have thought the drums were mixed right for the intro, because they kind of are. They don't quite mesh well with that. On the other hand, on like the actual sound design, which was cool, it was pretty neat, is super messy. Like, there wasn't really a groove I could discern in there. It was just kind of like, which there's a time for and a place for. I'm not particularly sure this track was that. So, keep working on it. It's pretty good. What's next? Another Strife and Mario track, but I've already played one from you, so I'm not going to play another today. Okay, let's do an electro track. Skytrius. Was that the drop? All right, so in the email that this guy sent in, the actual guy was asked a bunch of questions about, like, how about arrangement and writing and fills and that kind of thing. So I can see that this was a sort of a palette of things that he may not have been able to string together, which is not to say that you necessarily should have been able to string some of this thing together. The actual main thing that was happening, I actually kind of liked. The drop, like the mix was weird and the drums were weird and it wasn't very loud, but like the underlying feel of it was actually kind of neat. But I am going to still give you the same advice that I give the people on this position, is that like you should listen to more tracks that are like what you want to make and just kind of note what happens in it, like what they do in it, like what they do to move in between one part and the other thing, what exactly they do that are fills and what they're doing, like in their arrangements and that kind of thing. Just like analyze it. And I'm not, it's not like some really super in-depth like charting and like theory thing. Unless you really want to do that, you can. It's helpful, but like you don't need to go that hard. Just be like, at this point there's a fill. At this point there's a fill. It kind of feels good as like a little groove thing. And then if you try and do it and you're not really able to get the same kind of groove, then go back and be like, okay, exactly what is it that did that made it feel like that good? And then you can apply it to your tracks. Because like a lot of times people are just kind of like, oh, I don't understand the structure. I don't understand like how long and for what, for instrumentation to go on part one parts or whatever. And like a finished track is literally like a book, and an instruction manual for how to do this, for what they did. It's not like hidden behind everything. Like it's just straight up there. When does this instrument come in? Look at it, count. There you go. When, just put it, like get the BPM, put the track in FL, cut it up and be like, okay, that's the chorus, that's the verse. This is when this comes in, that kind of thing. And then just apply that map to your own stuff. And then you might notice that it's actually rather formulaic most of the time for almost all of it. So like that kind of stuff helps out. People having a good time in the chat. King Darrow Substance, another electro house track. Let's do it. That is a little hot on the fucking 13K. Just saying. Do 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 do. I was wrong. right, so I had to turn that down when that lead came in earlier because, damn. So I don't know what kind of listening situation you have that you were led to make that mixing decision on that lead. Either you have headphones that just don't reproduce those frequencies and you thought that you needed to, or you have hearing damage, because that was insane. Like, it wasn't even that the whole thing was that loud, because it really wasn't that loud. It's just that those particular frequencies were that loud, and those frequencies are not supposed to be that loud. And I don't mean like supposed to be as like, you know, this is the kind of the angle, whatever. Like that's like hearing damage level too loud. Not only that, like what you did with it was cool. The lead itself was nice. I actually kind of liked the bass during the not lead moments. The progression was meh, but I mean, whatever. People use it and it's cool. They like it. I might not like it, but whatever. It's cool. It works. But it's just very eclectic, and like I don't mean that like in terms of like, the instrumentation, because it was very predictable and straightforward for what this was. But the mix was just weird. The bass part was weird. The lead was entirely different from everything else on the track. Some of the background elements were like weirdly only the like side. There was no mid. It was just all side. The high, like that symbol from the beginning was just too intense. That has to be just a referencing error. So the solution to this is to use reference tracks, because I mean, other than overhauling what you are trained to do for your system or just changing your system entirely, listen to what things that you think are good on your system, and then don't try to beat them. Don't try to make your stuff sound better than them. Try to make your stuff sound in line with kind of how they feel. If they don't have ear-splitting 13K frequencies, don't put ear-splitting 13K frequencies in your track. And that kind of thing. That kind of deal. And if it's not unbelievably wide, don't make your track unbelievably wide. That actually has problems. There's like a technical reason why you don't do that in tracks, because if you play them live and you collapse into mono and you bring both sides in, then you run the risk of phase cancellation if you have only stereo. So that's why that's a problem. Other than that, and other than the fact that the second half of the track was identical to the first half of the track, although I get that's part of the genre. That's how the genre works. Like, if you're going to call this progressive electro house or trance electro, I don't fucking know. But I know that it's supposed to be repetitive, but that was like nothing new was added to the second half of that track. But if your goal was to make, like the most generic arrangement ever, you achieved it. And like that sounded like weird sarcasm, but that is actually a reasonable skill to have, to be able to throw out that kind of stuff so that you can, represent the mainstream and merge with that. As far as having a career, that's probably a good thing to do if you care about that kind of thing. Let's put one up. I'm probably going to regret this, but hardstyle. That little warble that happens, that's how you know there's too much compression. Play that again.
I don't want to hear your voice. I don't want to hear your voice. I don't want to hear your voice. Shut up!
So we're on like the fourth rise. this the drop? This track is 6 minutes long.
This music is being used as a communication tool between body and soul. And as far as I can see, it's making it easier for us to express our emotions, which are way too deep to describe with words. And therefore, from this point on, listen with your heart. Shut the fuck up. Listen with your heart.
So structurally, this might actually be totally in line with how hardstyle works. I didn't really research it that hard before, so I don't really know. But I mean, so that second drop with the really high frequency stuff was hopelessly out of tune. Don't really know what was up with that. Everything is just so compressed, like harder than anything I've ever seen. And like it for real, like I was making fun of it in the very beginning when like I said, I was like, this is how you know it's overcompressed. But for real, if it does that you know it's overcompressed. And like I know sometimes it's kind of hard to tell, but like listen to that and just turn it down a little bit. You obviously don't need to compress it that hard because there's no bass in this track. Everything else, I guess I can attribute to hardstyle. Cinematic orchestra-ish whip. I'm alright. An interlude I'm working on for my band's new album. I'm into it. Let's do this. I can kind of see where you're going with that. This similarly had too much compression, although I guess it wasn't that obvious when compared to the previous track. But it's still, that was still too much compression. Also, the way that you mix the orchestra elements, like the drum, the percussion, and like the snare, like all the, on like the glockenspiel thing, it didn't really sound like they were part of like a whole orchestra. They didn't sound like they were in the same room, which like you might not have thought you needed to do that, but for when you do orchestra stuff, for when I do orchestra stuff, I like the fact that it sounds like it's all in one room. Because when you listen to orchestra stuff in other genres and other things, the whole point of an orchestra is that it's all this big old thing all one together in one space. And the sound that we associate with it and being used in stuff is that sound of being in the same room. So when you mix them individually in such a way that they don't sound like they belong together, then it sounds weird. And that sounded weird. So that's So the compression bit and the bit about the one room is what I have to say about that track. Archon Wizard. Nothing attached in this email. Good job. ASAT Freestyle LaChop. Sent to me twice, but whatever. You guys are bad at email. This is like I think every single song I played today has had some kind of like noise filtered intro. Every single one. This was almost perfect for me. Like almost a perfect track. Like the groove, the mixing, the drums, all that was really good. Even the bass was pretty good, except that the bass to me sounds kind of like the first step in actually creating a bass that I would use in this track. It sounds like the bass synth level thing before I go do like resampling and shit to make it like something that I actually like, which is mostly a personal preference. And I get that, like, you know, it might not be you, and like this is perfectly a fine bass. It's just like it sounds very bass level, if you know what I mean. Not necessarily basic, because it's not basic, but it's still kind of interesting. During this, near the end there, where the bass got kind of heavier with the more high frequency stuff involved in that, like that's pretty cool. I don't know entirely what like your goal for the track is. Like I have to imagine this is pretty close to your design, since the groove is just so on point that you must know what you're doing with it. But I would have gone for a little bit more glitchy edits for stuff when the bass got kind of hard, and maybe some more basses than just that particular one. Although I did notice that one little massive sounding bass in there for a particular second, and that did kind of bring it down for me just a little bit. Not because it was a massive bass thing, but because its particular nature was that it was way too solid in comparison to the movie liquidy nature of the bass that you did choose to use. Even like a square version of that bass versus the saw version that you have would have been an interesting change of pace in terms of variation on the bass. Although the rest of the track, like the leads and like the chords and all that moving and progression, was all totally on point. So, good job, Mr. Sir, dude. I really hope that's not going to get me content ID'd on YouTube. Yeah. I'm going to have that stuck in my head right up until I play this next track. Zuma Southpaw, Hourglass. Just Zuma is the artist name. It's all right. Good job, SoundCloud. All right, so I don't necessarily care that this is just like presets the song, but um, the one thing that brings this song down from just being a wonderful example of the style of dubstep is the melodic component. Not necessarily for the progression, but how it's mixed in with the drop. The progression just doesn't fit with what the drop's doing. And it's not the usual mixing problem, although there is that mixing problem. It's the problem of just the notes isn't quite the notes aren't quite, they don't like line up well enough that like it feels like it belongs with what's happening. It's an arrangement issue, it's not so much an actual mixing issue. Um, uh, although one thing that I will say is the bass, the sound that you chose to be the main bass was a little too squelchy and to fit that rhythm. The other one, the other bass that you had in there that you used as the fill, actually would have made a much better main bass, and then the one that you have in the main bass would have been just fine being that fill bass. If you just switched those two presets in there and they had the notes on, it would have been like a lot better in my own opinion for that particular business. Like like I said, it is a wonderful example of like this kind like all the tropes that this style has ever had in terms of sound design. I don't really care that, you know, about how it was made, although it is like, and this is really a producer problem, but it is just so overdone. It's just so overdone. Listeners probably like it. That's probably fine. Just fix the progression that you chose to be the melodic aspect that you put in between the drops, and then everything else will be fine. He says there aren't any presets. I hyper doubt that. Especially since I think I recognized one of them at least. I mean, they're either presets or you did an unbelievable job of recreating them, so much so that you are so good at doing that that I cannot believe that you were so bad at putting together the melodic components to fit in with it. There's this certain skill overlap there that's missing. That's kind of what's up with that. What's next? Drum and bass track by Mitchell Broom. It's called Fly. Artist name is Onyx. Okay. And so that melody got a little bit too repetitive for its use. The mix actually wasn't that bad. The only thing that got to me was the fact that the main bass in the whole thing, didn't have a sub. There was no sub. There was the first harmonic and the second harmonic, but there was no sub. Sub was good. I like sub. This is what I referred to when I say I need a separate sub. The sound that you have does not have one in it, or it was too damaged. You need to just high pass it and separate in a new one. What else? I was gonna say, oh yeah, so the intro and the way that you got into the actual first drop was just a little too fluid. Like it didn't. I was just like, it was happening before I knew it was happening, kind of deal. Like I didn't expect it to be happening, which is something to be said for surprising your listeners. But this is sort of like an uneasy kind of like, oh, we're doing it now. Okay, cool. One easy way to kind of fix this problem is to either to have a break right before the drop, or to have everything before the drop very noticeably not as hard. Because the intro, the stuff in the intro that you had still had like drop level low bass in it, so it still had like pressure to it, so that when the drop happened, the change in pressure wasn't noticeable enough. It wasn't a big enough change. Lots of people like to like lead a high pass right after the drop, and then it hits it, so it feels, you haven't had bass for a while, so you have the bass, and that's something. Oh, it's hard. That's because it drops. You're dropping the bass. That works out. Try and find some way to vary your melodic composition, or even like some cooler fills could work out for your drums. A little slightly too much compression. I kind of liked how compressed it was, but it was a little too much. Other than that, not bad. Not bad. Kids waste. Dania. All right. Pro tip: this guy's email was a bunch of apologetic. Oh no, this is track stock. Just tell me what you want to think. I know that this is the viewer track stream. That like the whole point of this is I'm giving you advice and that kind of thing. But don't ever tell anybody what you think that your track that you think your track is bad, or point out things that you think that is bad in your track. Never do that, because there's always a chance. It's actually kind of a big chance that the stuff that you think is wrong, some other people are not going to notice is bad. They're not going to pick up on it. They're not even going to think that it was wrong. It's wrong to you because it's not precisely the idea of what you had in your mind for the track, but nobody knows what that is. Nobody has any idea what your goals were unless you tell them. So don't tell them. Also, don't tell them that it's bad or a whip. I mean, listen, it's honestly a bar and not like the rest of the song. You tell them it's a whip. But generally speaking, don't give them a reason to doubt the track's completion or that the track is like representative of itself. Because if they do, then they're going to start looking for shit. And I mean, I know that's my job at the moment, but like if you're going to send it to like A&R, like a buddy or like an artist you like, that kind of thing, never ever tell them any of that. Because then they're going to be like, okay, well, if it sucks so bad, then why am I listening to it? Is it muted? Okay, that was weird. All right. The only thing that strikes me about this track is that during the dorps, the actual impact of the percussion is not adequate against the bass. And I get the feeling that it's kind of your intentions. You wanted it to kind of meld in with the bass to feel like a much smoother wash of sound. And for that to work, the bass needs to be at the level of the percussive elements. Because right now the bass stands way out of far of everything. And it sounds cool. Like I like that, but it's too far away from everything else in the track is the thing, is the problem. And if you did get it in there to be kind of like in with the percussive elements, that all feels kind of washing the air in there. Also, let me check something. I just realized I didn't check this. Yeah, separate sub. There should be one, but it shouldn't be that loud. Like because again, this all feels like something is very, hate to use the word, but a very organic kind of human sounding deal. And while the separate sub would kind of make it sound a little too perfect, sterile, that kind of like clinically, good, that kind of deal. It still should be there to reinforce the idea, but it doesn't need to be like unbelievably loud. It could be quieter than your average, like, dubstep banger kind of thing. It would still work for this. Um, the so then like, bringing the stuff down, bringing the bass in there or bringing out the percussion for that matter, that kind of thing. That could work out for that purpose. As far as arrangement and kind of where to go with it, because that's what your email said, like, there should, I think, because the progression are well enough and like easily enough extrapolated position, like chord bases, that if you created a progression near the end that had more of a melodic element to it, you could do kind of like a Hans Zimmer kind of feel over it with like an actual melody as opposed to just like the reverse piano, and that's it. Just kind of have like an actual like add on to it. Not doesn't have to be anything like really big or prominent or like in your face, but something to kind of like add in there with it. Maybe like a piano or some strings, whatever. Like that could work. Like kind of that deal. The actual transition from the intros and the breakdowns into what is like the parts that are the drop feels a little too right into it. Like there could be some extra like glitchiness or like choppiness in it to kind of like be like there's this drop coming kind of problem. I kind of had the same issue as the track before you, only not nearly as like that kind of thing. Other than that, though, this is pretty cool sounding stuff. So, good job with that. media file link, and a WAV file. Not looking to download a WAV file. OD overdose? Like ODIE overdose. Flat tire. I'm on my way. Demo. Is that Deep House? Is that what Deep House is? I don't know what Deep House is. Um, I guess that was a pre-master. It says a demo. I guess it's not. It's not private. It's public, and the downloads are enabled. But I guess I was enabled because it's sending it here because I think I might have said that in the instructions. But um, the mastering could have used a lot of work. The punchiness could have been super improved. The progression, I mean, I guess this is kind of how the style works, where the thing doesn't really do much because it's a groove and you groove with it, and then it stops and you're good, and you move on the next groove because that's how grooves do, and that's fine, I suppose. I get all that element. Like nothing really stood out to me as being a big issue. Like the bass was cool, the plucks and stuff with the sounds and whatever, all mixed well together. It's just not very like the mastering could have just been pushed up a little bit more, which is mostly a personal sensibility. But again, whatever genre this is, it's not really my forte, but technically speaking, like, that's the only thing I could really point out to. It's being a problem. Is this like Shallow House? Midly submerged house? Under house? High Tides by Zilch. Slammin'. 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 Taking 16 years to download an MP3. There we go. That's the same progression as the track we just listened to. Salmon. Has the song started yet? And then it ended. I have absolutely no idea what you were going for with this track. I'm not saying like I just don't. I think it's bad because like I don't even know what you're trying to do. So like objectively, I can't. That's whatever genre deep breaks. Like much like the other track, there didn't seem to be a lot of anything technically wrong with it. For my own sensibilities, it didn't seem like there was a lot of bass. So I was kind of like, and like I don't know, I think the ratio like between like the very tiny drums and like everything else, the tiny drums could be just a little bit louder. The clap felt like it was a little too loud. Um, the melody did get like super boring really fast, and it might have been because the last track had the exact same progression, which should say something to you about the progression you've chosen to play. And I know that this is really common in like a lot of music that like there are only so many progressions that people like, and like some of them are pretty easy, and you're gonna use them. And the 4-chord song and all that stuff. So I can't really complain because I do it too, but I'm gonna complain anyway. Try and be a little bit, at least a little bit original with your progression. Like the A-side guy. That was pretty fun. Learn what 7 chords are. That's all I gotta say about that. Oh, stand riders from a while ago. Let's do this. You know, if a track takes too long to render and you are just trying to send me a demo, you could just record it somehow. I mean, I know that not everyone uses FL and everyone has Edison, but I'm sure they got something similar to Edison. You can just play it and record it. Machine Killer by Stan Riders. These people ride stands. Too much compression. So that wasn't so bad. The mix was pretty cool. The only thing that bugged me was that it was the same bass the entire time, and not only that, like the bass itself, like I had a couple of, like the beginning of it, like when they first showed up, was pretty cool. I'm not gonna play the part I want, but the point being is that like when it was fully on and like all the way up and the modulation was all there, it had this delayed chorus kind of like doubly crunchy feel to it, and something about that particular texture I don't really like. It's something I try to avoid in my own sounds, and this is really a very personal opinion, not something to do with that's super like objectively bad or not. What I would say is particularly bad is the fact that like there was just like not that was the only bass, super not variated at all, and like the modulations were kind of like way too hardcore to keep up with. Um, this kind of music is hard to do because it's so fast and like the transients are everywhere, and there's so much side chaining and like doing the cuts and all that are really hard to keep it rhythmic but also being interesting and that whole jazz. So like it's hard to not do what you just did, but it's something really it is to kind of to be avoided. I know that other artists do that, and it does work sometimes, but it's just like something that like I don't think works as well as a little like more controlled taste. And if you are going to do something like this, it needs to fill more space. Like it needs to be more Billane like or Billin, however you pronounce his name. And well, because when he does this stuff and he does do kind of like seemingly random, just full on everything kind of thing, where it's just density for the whole time. It's they actually do fill like all of the space and not just kind of like the almost basic um saw wavy like aspect of it that doesn't really change a whole lot. Also, I did kind of feel like there was kind of just like a low pass on the entire thing the whole time, the bass that is, not everything else. So that's kind of what I mean. And sometimes I know that the texture doesn't really fit very well, but experiment with like introducing a little bit of white noise behind the bass, like in there with the processing and the distortion and all that, and that kind of smooths out some stuff sometimes. Just so you know. This song is called Tropical Nintendo by Tibbs. There's your bass right there. Okay, well, that was chill. Parts of that were kind of interesting. The other more parts of it were like the drums really got to me. Don't do those drums. Those drums were bad for my brain. It wasn't so much. I mean, maybe it was just a sample choice, but they didn't fit well enough together with the previous chili tracks that we got shown. That like there were still kind of mixing issues. Like stuff kind of popped out weirdly. The do like is gonna be in my brain for the rest of eternity, and not in a good way. Arrangement wise, just a lot can be done with variations on things, especially if you're gonna do like a really low key, low profile, like super chill track where like almost nothing is happening in the track. Repetition is not your friend if that's what's happening. Like you need to keep doing stuff to keep people interested. Like that's my opinion on that. Brainfly, first floor. I guess it's the first floor of Brainfly Estates. The Lord of 2K. All right, so the transition from your intro to your drop was a problem because there was no transition at all. It just happened. I thought this is gonna be another one, like another chill track. I was wondering why I was having this giant spat of chill tracks, and that's how they drop. Drop was really cool. I liked it a lot. The hi-hats were way too loud. Way too loud. It's a little too harsh. The snare also didn't fit very well with what was happening, like, sort of texture-wise. I'm not totally sure what you could do to fix that or even what would fit better, but what you've got didn't. The ride that you used in the intro. Use literally, please, anything other than that sample. Anything other than that sample. For that ride. Just anything at all. This is purely because I know what sample it is and I've heard it 2 billion times. That's the only reason. If no one else cares, no regular music listeners aren't going to care, but for just my own peace of mind, use anything else. I was going to say something about. Oh yeah, yeah. It was like super cliche and weird, and I just wasn't super into it. That. You also need a separate sub. You need a separate sub. Separate your sub. That's it. Other than that, good job. Mr. Brainfly. Gamer, hyperspeed. So having one note going and then another note on top of it doing the actual melody is not actually how harmony works. Too much compression. I want to point out that as ridiculous as this actually had one of the more reasonable transitions from the intro into the drop that's happened so far. My primary recommendation to you is that you listen to music. All right, so with that palate cleanser, let's go listen to something else. Another email with someone who didn't attach anything. Uh, Elastic MCR Mammoth. To that last guy, like, I'm not trying to like horribly insult you by like not actually giving you any constructive criticism about your track. It's just that the track was so indicative of the fact that like you don't really have the concept of what you're trying to do nailed down. I'm just being like, you don't know what music sounds like. I mean, like you're not using what you think music is and what you're creating. Because when I tell you to listen to music, I really mean listen to stuff that you're trying to do that people have already done, and then look at yours and note the differences, and then try to kind of reconcile that. That's why I said that. That was unbelievably bad, though. Back to this game. Just a little too much compression. That's kind of screwing with your sub in there. Like it gets kind of floofy for a moment there. That's to do with compression. Um, that's kind of good. Like I like that. The bass itself wasn't super interesting, but kind of the space it created, and also like the super subby nature of like the main bit was pretty sweet. I dug that. It reminds me of some pretty old school drum and bass for that kind of deal. So I dug that. This track is named Winnin'. That was my addition to your track. So this doesn't just need a separate sub. This needs any sub at all. But then once you make that sub, then you should make a separate sub. You need sub. The drums were super out of place. Like they were nice and punchy, but they were way punchier and punchier than the character of this track necessarily required. This was it's kind of like a soft touch track, and I'm not saying that it needed to be punchy because you can still make it punchy without being piercing. This is piercing. You need to be kind of punchy but still able to roll with what the track is doing. And this can be easily done just by kind of reducing the high frequency content present in some of the drums. That's about it, really. Hat was too high. Need some sub. Don't mention that. The bass design was kind of okay. I was alright with that. Could use a little bit more variation. The background progression was very kind of didn't contribute much to it. Just kind of made it feel like it was during a slow point in the first Terminator movie, which I guess some people might find to be a compliment. What else we got? Chill D&B Trap. Okay. All right. It's by Spavek. It's called State Escape. That certainly was a chill trap thing. I don't know about it being drum and bass though. I guess that was kind of like half-timey, like drum steppy almost. I guess I could be qualified as that. Not bad though. Subwoofer, industrial mechanism. I like that. Subwoofer. Is that my drums? So at first I was about to be all like, oh, this is presets or whatever, and like some of them totally were, and like, I, it kind of sounds like someone took one of my FLPs and used it as a mixing template for something like this, and that stood out to me about the drums, because it didn't really fit things, but it sounded like what my drums sound like when they're fitted with something that I do, and that's why I don't want people. Okay, so like when you look at my tracks and look at the drums by themselves, the idea is not that they're supposed to sound like that by themselves. That's how they sound when they're mixed with everything else to sound like the way they're supposed to sound. Because that's how you mix things. You make stuff sound the way you want them to sound by themselves, and then you play with other stuff. You go, okay, it needs to change some things. You change some stuff, and then when you listen to it by itself, all of a sudden it doesn't sound like it's supposed to. And that's what that sounded like. However, some of the sound design there was pretty cool. It wasn't like actually most of that had nothing to do with me. It might have been stuff that was related to me at one point, but it was not anything that I actually did that someone just stole. So he did actually do stuff in there, unless he took it from someone else. But some of the sound, okay, the lead thing, the wah wah, doing this pitch rise on every single note was extremely annoying. It was also really too like high frequency. Not high pitch, the pitch is fine. Just the high frequency was like a bit much, and it didn't like because then you intersperse that with the drop with much more lower frequency things, and it was like just the mix, the element there did not flow very well. Actually, the structure in general of this track was really wacky. Like the rises were cool. They were a bit too clowny sounding is the word I want to use, but like I don't know. Like again, like the template thing. That's currently my guess as to what you didn't do the job for the sounds that you made. You still need to tweak stuff because no matter how good a template is, unless you're doing precisely what that template was designed for, it's not going to sound quite right. You got to change stuff to make it kind of fit together. And if you didn't do that, then I'm sorry for assuming you did, but that's what it sounds like you did. So you did a very peculiar mixing job. Let's put it like that. Xavier Fernandez, he used a separate sub. Scrap metal VIP master. It was caps. not bad. Um, the basic got kind of repetitive, and then the main like big growl felt really out of place and kind of what was going on. And also the phasey kind of high frequency thing also felt kind of out of place. They both felt like sounds that like you kind of wanted what they kind of were, but weren't totally sure about what you wanted, and you try to settle with what that was, and just didn't really do anything with it. It had kind of the usual issue about stuff not really fitting together, and it's kind of like close to Seamless Riser. Sorry about that. It was kind of close, you know. It wasn't like it monstrously out of place or whatever, but it was just, I had something. I mean, also like, it didn't really feel like there were a lot of like higher frequency things going on, and some of the things felt like it was just too MIDI. It was too mid present. Not that that's bad necessarily. It's just kind of awkward. Reasonable. A reasonable track. Mr. Archon sent me his track wizard again, and again didn't actually put it in the track. Like, don't send me remixes. I'm not gonna play them, because I will get copyright hit. Want to do that. JV Atlantis. Suddenly acid? That was actually pretty good. That was one of the first like harder tracks we've had today, where the like melodic content of the intro and the drop actually fit together. Although this track primarily relied on the melody for it to be really this track with a few actual sort of like what we would describe as bass music bases, but it worked out very well. This worked out. This was actually a very well made, well put together track. I don't really have a huge amount of technical complaints about it, except actually I do. That random acid moment in the middle, I would have been okay if you kind of expanded on that and like made that into like the next bit, but then you just kind of stopped. This is there. There was no reason for that. And then also the next part after that, where it was the melodic break and they're doing the lead line. It's not like they put a string on top of that, but that it wasn't like a good enough like sample set that when it did some pitch changes and it sounded really suddenly really fakey and really weird. And like maybe that was what you were going for, but that was something else. Melanchol preeminence. Just get quieter. That's the same track right there. Somebody decided to go all Aphex Twin on it. This track has like the opposite problem than most of the other tracks in terms of stereo width. It's just it was too mono. A lot of the other tracks were like wide, wide, so wide. Forget mids. There's nothing in the middle. No, whatever. And this track was all like and so like that was kind of the issue for most of this. The progression was a bit not much happening, and this weird moment where like there was like the drums and then it was the same part but quieter. I don't know what that was about. Arrangement as a whole was kind of awkward and a little bit weird. It had promise, like when the intro was happening, it was all kind of like, yeah, it was kind of like nice, build up kind of deal. The mix of the drums also just wasn't very tight or punchy or heavy or any kind of thing that's good about associated with drums. So like, work on that a lot, please, thank you. Okay, here we go. Archon has actually given me his track, Mr. or Wizard or whatever it's called. It's apparently called Audio Tool Day 2014. Archon? Don't know what that is. This track has the hardest hitting kick ever and like the weakest snare known to man. I really hope that's just because of the build up. Alright, so this track's problem is twofold. One, the weird ass stereo is pretty weird ass. It leans one way and the other for all the weird ass wideness you got on some of the sounds there. The other thing is that it's just empty sounding. Like you have really loud kicks and snares, really loud basses, which are cool, but there's no air around it. There's no like reverb, white noise, harps or anything. There's nothing going on up there, and so it sounds super just kind of alone. This track is alone by itself. So deal with those two things and you got a pretty reasonable banger. Zaha's track. You are forever, Zaha. Because that's 7. Milky Way. The the way is Milky. So on the whole, this wasn't so bad. The principal issue with this is similar to some of the other ones we've seen today, where things like when the chords were hitting during the drop moments, the basses around them were too muddy sounding in comparison. This muddy characteristic is mostly caused by the fact that the chords had no mid characteristics to them, versus the basses around them. Like, so you notice that part right there where you have the bass with the chords? That's actually a good idea. I don't necessarily mean to have like the growly vowely things with the chords, although you can do that too. I usually have something pretty like electro-y saw-washy kind of bass thing. I put that beneath the chords so that when the chords are playing and then the bass next to them are playing, they have the same. It's still functionally like, you know, the chords are the main focus, but there's still enough oomph in there to compete with the basses around it, because it doesn't really sound very good or flow very well when it sounds too different in that way. That ending outro thing was really random, and the instrumentation choice kind of threw me for a loop, but I didn't particularly like it. Other than that, though, not bad. Although it may not ever be as epic as Puppy Step, it is, you know, functionally better. It's a go track, a dubstep whip. Not particularly to that snare. Like, the way that the snare is. It's not something I like. It's having an EQ thing. It's like, it's not weird wideness, muddy, not. I mean, work on that. The main bass was cool, but it could have used a little bit more competition in terms of modulation and variation, in terms of just stuff to fill in there. Because like, as cool as those like ultra wet squelchy sounds are, they do get really kind of tired to listen to if they're used like in succession a lot. So I tend to use those things as fillers mostly. But if you're gonna main with them, they need to have support. They're kind of like tanks. They need infantry support. That kind of thing. Other than that, nice job. The drums, like, the arrangement of the drums was pretty nice. I like the kick. It's just that snare didn't really help. Frantics, D&B whip. over the rainbow.
Within your soul, may you find me there somewhere within your soul. May you find me
So the one weirdness that I have with this track is that the drums seem way too wide. Like the snare hits on like audibly the like not center, and like I don't mean like everything is mono forever. I mean that like that kind of width I think is more well spent on the synths more than the drums themselves. Like because there were some percussive elements that were panned. There's some hats and that kind of thing, and like it was cool, but like it felt like the force of them were kind of pushed away a little bit. And again, like I said, I feel like that kind of width addition could be more added towards, the synths and things like that kind of thing. Other than that, this was really good. The vocals were super cliche, but like I mean, most vocals are, and like that's fine. And like sonically, it fits wonderfully, so it fits the song, and like it really makes it work. The melody was nice. I actually liked the progression, and like it did the good liquid thing where like I could groove with it, and it worked. How broken did I just break everything? Not that broken. Okay, so good work. Dylan Matrix, Solar Flare. I've been having troubles a lot in the mixing mastering department for this track and could use some pointers in the right direction. So says Matthew Davis? Is that Dylan? Who's Dylan? So, the guitar there, it was a bit busy. Like, I know it's obviously a sampled, guitar there, and like that's the obvious part might also be a problem. But when a guitar player is playing something, it's rarely that just like like the entire song. Generally, not the kind of thing you want to do. Although, if you are going to do that and you are going to do it that low, I recommend that you multi-track it somehow. Depending on the library, you can do that. If you're using shreddage, I don't know if you are or not, but if you are, then you can double track it. Do one left and one right, run it through the processing, make sure that it's stereo, and then everything will sound a lot better. Um, I was gonna mention something else about. I don't know. Maybe like also like kind of the busyness of the melody in general, just going kind of felt like a bit much for me. But mix wise, the drums were like way louder than everything else. It almost sounded like you kind of just avoided having to duck anything by just making everything really quiet. Um, not especially for this kind of music, I can objectively say it's not going to work if you do that, like the way that you've done it. So try and get everything else up in the mix ish more, that kind of thing. Also, some of the like effects, sound effects that you have, like the reverse cymbals and like the cha thing, were like way overused, and it should be like a little bit more impactful because of their sparse useness, not just like all the time kind of deal. That's yeah, that's what's up. Some of the chances of kind of surprised it seems like it's a real guitar. It's not a real guitar. It's a sample guitar. There is a difference. It's certainly not Slayer. If it is Slayer, it's a kind of Slayer I've never heard before. Let's see. This one is called Chance Rendered Biscuits. Okay, now there's a whole bunch of people chatting saying that I have apparently never used Slayer. Fun fact, before I owned a guitar in 2008, all I did was do fake guitar stuff. I tried really, really, really hard to make fake guitars work. And this is back when like Guitar Rig 2 was a thing. Actually, Guitar Rig 3 was new when I got the guitar. I have tried really hard in the past to make Slayer actually sound like a reasonable guitar replacement. And for a while, I actually got kind of close. Um, it was never super wonderful. Obviously, it wasn't as good as having an actual guitar. And it's not anywhere near as good as the kind of solutions you have now, where you can have something like shreddage, where you can have a sampled library that actually is reasonable, as opposed to what I used back then, which was a sampled, like a sound font, a clean guitar sound font that I ran through Guitar Rig to try and make it work. But, so I used to do stuff like. That is Slayer. That's what I got Slayer to do back in 2007. And once I got a real guitar, I pretty much never looked back. So there's a little seamless history for you. Now back to this. People are talking about the sub in the chat and talking about how like, you hear it really well. It's really low, but like, it's really prevalent. And the reason why you can hear that is because there's extra harmonics on the sub. Kind of repeated a bit there. The whole second half of the song didn't seem to be much different from the first. When the chords came in and the kicking and everything happened all together, everything was fine. But pretty much when everything was separated, the mix was just a little bit awkward, especially with the claps. But that doesn't really fit. Of course, with everything happening together, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That works out. So, other than that, nice job. It's not totally something I enjoy, but I mean, did do the job. The job. This track is called Mobius by Kelzak. Kelzak. So obviously a pre-master, so get that mastered and it'd be pretty okay, I suppose. As far as pre-masters go, it kind of sounds like something that would work out being mastered. I mean, I don't really do pre-masters myself, so. One thing that struck me is that those chords were just like always on, like always, except for like, the few moments where there was that rhyme bass that went on during the drop. Like that kind of got old. It became a fight to stay awake, but that's your thing. Then cool, I suppose. It's just a mush of chords the whole time. The drums were all right. Like the mix is okay, but like the high frequencies are kind of low. But I guess that'd be solved by proper mastering. It's just I really don't know what that sound like until I got mastered really. So do that. Mm, 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 mm. Mm, 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 mm. Top Cats Beat by Killy. That's a pretty reasonable beat. I haven't looked at like straight hip hop in a while, but that actually would go down pretty good with someone reasonable on top of it. Some R&B ish kind of thing happening with some nice harmonies and soothing vocals that could work out. Pretty all right. See, the thing about hip hop, like just the whole of it, the whole genre, unlike the harder genres like the trap and EDM and that kind of thing, is that like just literally anything goes. Like things that I've seen be beats for really huge acts are just so bad, like so out there and stupid, and it's because what makes like an actual for real like good hip hop track is mostly the vocals. How well that works out, how well those are mixed on top of it matters the most. The beat itself, like obviously certain genres work out certain better. Like for real R&B beats have certain standards to be held to. It's like this, but as far as being like, if someone's like, is this a good hip hop beat? It's kind of like, is it in tempo? Is there like a drum in it? And then yes, it is. But this is pretty good. I enjoyed that because it had more than a drum in it. Zossie. No boundaries. I wonder if this means eclipse. Fade out. Oh my god. Oh god. Um, this was weird. This track was really kind of random, and not just be like because of the weird ass arrangement, but because also just sort of it started out like kind of in one key, and then it was like the drops in another key, and then went back to the other key, and like weird. But I liked for at first I was all gonna be all like, well, your basses don't really sound like it belong to each other because I had this one thing that's run through a guitar amplifier and it sounds like it doesn't have any high end, and they had this other one that's really high end and all that thing. But like I got kind of used to it, and then I kind of like it now. So, still weird though. Mm, 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 mm. Alex Mayer's melodic dubstep whip. Work in progress. It good. See, I'm more afraid of. Some of these basses are actually pretty cool, like growly things that I liked. It's just that like they weren't mixed super great. Like they lacked a couple. They lacked the high end stuff to mesh well with stuff happening around it. There was a bass beneath the chords, which was nice, but it was low passed, or at least it felt like it was. And like the benefit, the coolness of having like a saw based bass in beneath those big like shiny chords is that the higher frequencies of that bass are going to interact with the higher frequencies of the chords, and they do so in ways that are kind of interesting. Um, Most of the problems with this track were based on that. The drums kind of sound like something I would have done 2-ish years ago. Um, the hat slash tambourine thing going on in there was kind of weird. It was way too loud. Some of the higher frequency stuff in the drums were way too loud. Like something I know a lot about people is that they tend to make really high frequency drums and then not very high frequency synths. And I honestly think it should be kind of the reverse, or at least even out either, so that they kind of fit together. You don't really like, there's the idea in EQing that like you cut a hole in something so that the frequencies of something else can fit into it, so that you have more headroom and that kind of thing. But you don't need to do that as hard for higher frequencies. Louder, like the lower you go, the louder they are in terms of level for them to sound as loud as they were on the higher frequencies, which means that you can layer a whole bunch of high frequency stuff on top of each other without doing much to them, and it won't be so bad. Sometimes you do. Sometimes really high frequency hi-hats damage really high frequency something else. But that's because both of them didn't need to be that loud in the first place. Lower stuff, you need to like cut in there for, when things come in and things are going to be so loud. But for the most part, it's not super necessary to cut it so hard that you would have like no higher frequencies at all in a chord or a bass just because of the hats. That kind of thing. Yeah, so I think I'm about done for today. It's getting a bit late, and I need to eat food because I should take a break during today's stream. I should have during the half of it. My mic's phase stuffed. Oh, that yeah. That's because there's a problem with the mixer. So yeah, today's stream was pretty good. I I don't know precisely how many I got just today. Let's see. So that's 100. That's 50. That's 100. That's 150. Okay, so I got 151 submissions. Well, those are only the ones that I looked at after 7 p.m. when the stream started. I don't know how many I got before that because I don't look at them. I am doing a viewer track mix this week on this Friday. I am going to be doing one. So if you want to submit a track to be used for that, scroll down for the submission instructions for that. This will be pretty good because I'll actually have tracks from last one that I almost did that I didn't do, and some new ones from submissions that have happened for a while. So should have enough material to fill up a full 4-hour set. So that'd be a good time. If you have any questions about any of that, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day. Hope you had a good Christmas and all that, if that's the thing you do.